welcome. This is the podcast I Do What I Want. I am your host, Hollis, and I'm an author of fantasy. So for the next few weeks, if you listen to the last episode in October, you know that I'm reading short stories that were originally part of the Power Therapy series, Power Therapy developed by Dr. Kobus Vorster. And, they were kind of like fairy tales that I wrote that illustrated the therapy techniques that he had created. And I thought they were really, really cool. All of the characters, the world, all of that is mine. The techniques and everything, those are all Dr. Voister. But I wanted to share them with you. So we will be continuing with the second short story, which is called Bodyguard today. But before we do that, I have some exciting announcements to share with you. First of all, Ignited, the first book in the Lost Beacon Chronicles. I just sent that to press today. Everything looks great. I'm going to get a proof in a day or two, and judging from how the files look and everything now, I'm going to approve that proof, and then it will be available for purchase. So excited. Amazon might have it up for pre-sale tomorrow. I don't know. I will definitely make an announcement on my Instagram, and I'll put a little short on YouTube as well if it is available. Of course, I'm going to check. I am very, very excited. But yes, Ignited is coming. Are you ready to be ignited? Really excited about this. It's my shortest novel I've written so far. Just FYI, the Lost Beacon Chronicles are not going to be long books. Spare the Swallow is about 370 pages long. That is the origin story of the series, but the Lost Beacon Chronicles themselves, each of those individual books, they're going to be under 200 pages each. So they're really not, they're going to be quick reads. and Ignited is actually about 190 pages. So yeah, hitting those goals, making it work. The other thing I want to announce is last month I mentioned that I had entered To Save a World and The Queen Witch, which are the first two books in the Rashawn series, totally separate from my other historical fantasy series. Check out episode 28 of my podcast if you want to know about the differences between those two series that I write. But I entered them in the BookFest Book Awards for fantasy, and the BookFest is National Book Awards. I was a finalist last you heard, and I was thinking, oh gosh, I'm so happy to be a finalist, but maybe I will place. I placed. I placed. I'm very excited. I placed. It's very exciting. So, yeah, both books placed, actually. I placed with both books in the fantasy category. I thought I would be lucky with one. To Save a World got the honorable mention, and The Queen Witch got third place. Out of 4 places in the fantasy category, I got 2 of them. Super stoked right here. Super duper stoked. Yes. So, yes, you are looking at an award-winning author if you are watching this on the video with my face. And if you're not, you're listening to an award-winning author. Ooh. So that's really, really just so exciting for me. And if you are interested in fantasy, I have it on good authority that I'm good at writing fantasy. I have awards now. I can Yeah. And I'm entering more contests because now that I'm doing that, and because I just had never entered before. I just hadn't. And so, yeah, I'm going to be entering more awards, and hopefully I can start stacking those up and making myself a little scrapbook of all the things I win. Yee! Another thing I'm going to say, one more announcement before I get into stuff, is that I am going to be a guest at JordanCon in April of 2024. JordanCon is, if you don't know, is a fantasy and sci-fi book convention in Atlanta, Georgia. It's pretty big. I don't know how widespread it is, but yeah, I mean it gets a good turnout, and it's all sci-fi fantasy authors and just the books, and it's based, the name comes from Robert Jordan, obviously the Wheel of Time book series, which is phenomenal. And if you haven't read it, it's been years since I read it, but they're gorgeous. If you love fantasy, strongly recommend. And if you love fantasy, honestly, you've probably already read them. Yes, so I'm going to be a guest at JordanCon this year. I will be in some author panels, and I'll be there to meet you. You can I'll sign books very happily. You can ask me questions. And you can meet a bunch of other great authors. My friend Alara Dunn, who is the author of The Magic Locker, The Witch's Curse, she is also going to be a guest. So she and I will be hanging out together at JordanCon. We are crazy excited, and we hope that you will come see us. So go get your tickets, and there are going to be so many fabulous things. You can go home super happy with arms full of books and many new worlds to discover. Hopefully two of those worlds might be Rashawn and the Lost Beacon Chronicles. I don't know, maybe. Hopeful, optimist. So, to kick off, I'm going to get into the short story, but since Ignited is going to press this week, I thought it would be kind of fun to read you the introduction for Ignited. So the introduction is not the prologue or anything. What this is since Ignited, the Lost Beacon Chronicles is historical fantasy, and the introduction explains to you what event in actual history I am basing or inspired by for this particular book. So to, whet your appetites a little bit for some historical fantasy, I did want to read you the brief introduction for Ignited. So here we go. I have a love affair with ancient history, so it only makes sense to me as an author to be inspired by those long ago events that helped to shape our modern world. Ignited is inspired by the Roman invasion of ancient Britain in 43 AD. For those of you who are familiar with the British history, you will know that the Romans had slowly been gaining territory in Britain since about 25 or 30 BC. However, what happened in 43 AD was different. The Catavolani were one of the largest and strongest tribes in all of ancient Britain. Most importantly, they controlled almost all of what is now central England and much of the eastern coast. While other tribes had submitted to Roman rule, the Catavolani held firmly against the rule of the foreign empire. This not only was a thorn in the side of the Roman Empire, but their resistance prohibited Roman expansion. In 43 AD, the Romans sensed a weakness in the Catavolani, and they struck out to claim what they believed should be theirs. The Catavolani fought back valiantly, and new pages of history were written in the Book of Time. Ignited is my fantastical telling of how these events may have taken place from the perspective of the Catavolani. Please keep in mind that it is not wholly historically accurate. I am a fantasy author after all. So, that is the introduction to Ignited. I hope that you like that and it resonates with you a little bit. So, and also if you want to check out some British history, that's cool too. I think you should. So, moving on, switching gears, let's go to get to the beginning of it. Go to the next short story in the series. So, these short stories are continuations of each other. They are not, one story then another story. So, if you haven't listened to episode 29, Picking a Fight with Yourself, I do recommend that you go listen to that first, because this story is a continuation from Picking a Fight with Yourself. And it, of course, displays another of the power therapy techniques that Dr. Kobus Vorster developed to help people to better maintain their mental health. So as always, and again, the story is on my screen here, so I'm gonna be like looking at the computer screen and not at you while I read it, but please excuse me. And I hope you will enjoy my little short story called Bodyguard. It felt like a demotion of sorts. Most soldiers of the kingdom of Tigist would have balked at this angle of perception. To be assigned to personally guard the crowned prince on a diplomatic mission was a high honor to be coveted. But Kais did not feel that way. He felt as though it were an improper use of his skills as a soldier. However, the queen had personally asked him to watch over her son on this mission, and he could never speak out against a personal request from the queen. He had just returned from a long-term assignment abroad. So this was likely a temporary assignment until King Ramos found something more suitable for him. Keist gave the slightest of curt nods to himself to affirm his thought. This would not be permanent. Keist rode his horse alongside the overly elaborate carriage with Prince Jaren inside. They had been on the road to the neighboring kingdom of Pike for 3 days. Presently, they were close to the border between the two kingdoms, which skirted the Fey territory of Tigist. Things had been pleasantly quiet, and the early autumn weather made for excellent traveling. Keist narrowed his amber eyes in disapproval as he looked over the swirling gold leaf designs covering the royal carriage. As a bodyguard, he felt that so obviously marking yourself as royalty when traveling was an absurdly unnecessary risk. But the king insisted that all the pomp and circumstance of royalty was to be visually utilized. The rest of the guards he traveled with did not seem to mind it. Perhaps this was the usual way of things. Keist was the only new member to the prince's personal guard. To his knowledge, he was also the only one that the queen had appointed. Something about the circumstances of his appointment nagged at the back of his brain, but he did not wish to dwell on it, so he did not. This was to be a very straightforward meeting with the rulers of Pike to renew a long-standing treaty, then straight back home to Tigist. The whole mission should take less than a fortnight. Keist rolled his head around to stretch his neck and clear his head. Best just to focus on the mission and be ready for his next assignment. When he got back, no need to dwell on strange thoughts. A lot had changed while he had been away on his assignment. Things were bound to feel odd to him. Amari crouched low as she followed the path of the royal carriage carrying the crowned prince. Since that day in the central grove when she had helped the satyr, everything had changed. King Ramos's soldiers had occupied their little village, and all other Fey villages apparently. They were forcing the Fey to house them and finding reasons to... They were forcing the Fae to house them and finding reasons to take many of her neighbors away, never to be seen again. It was so frightening. She and her father had been safe from the soldiers so far, likely due to her father's high standing in the community, but she knew it was only a matter of time. No one had any clue why King Ramos was doing this to them. The soldiers certainly didn't share any information with them. Most of them were blindly following orders anyway. Amari didn't know why any of it was happening, but she knew that it wasn't leading anywhere good for her people. When she heard the crowned prince would be traveling through Feylands, she immediately devised a plan. She had not told her father what she was doing today. He would have stopped her out of concern for her safety. Ironically, she wouldn't have even thought to do something like this if her father hadn't encouraged her to be more proactive lately. Anyway, she was resolved. She was going to kidnap the crown prince and hold him as leverage until King Ramos agreed to stop doing whatever he was doing to her people and just leave them alone again. Your Highness, we are making camp for the night. If you would care to step out of the carriage and into your tent we have prepared, Keist said in his naturally gruff voice as he popped his ginger-haired head into the royal carriage and informed Prince Jaren of the present situation. Excellent. Thank you, Keist, Jaren responded. He had, of course, realized what was happening outside of the carriage, but was used to sitting inside until they were ready for him to exit. It was safer for him that way, but it always did feel awkward to sit quietly and do nothing while everyone else did all the work for you. Jaren had never liked it. He longed to do more for himself. Actually, he wanted so much more than that, but he had long since accepted that he would never have the things he wanted. His was an existence of confinement. Jaren enjoyed a good stretch of his stiff limbs as he stepped out of the carriage. Keist was standing right there, ready to escort him the 30 feet to his prepared tent. The prince sighed, gave a nod of gratitude to the two men, and the two men walked over to the tent, and Jaren went inside to settle in for the evening. A plate of freshly cooked rabbit and a jug of water had been placed inside his tent. He would eat alone again. He ate his fill while listening to the guards outside laugh and joke with each other before lounging back on his bedroll to read a book by the lamplight inside the tent. If he tried to go outside, the guards would just tell him he was safer in his tent and stare at him until he went back. There had never been a kinship developed between himself and his guards. There was no ill will, simply social indifference. He had felt an urge to speak more with his new guard, Keist. The man was gruff, stoic, and always seemed to have a furrowed brow, but there was something about him that Jaren liked. He hoped that perhaps they could hold conversations to pass the time. He dared not hope for friendship, only an acquaintanceship. That would be more than enough for Jaren. Keist may be his bodyguard in the traditional sense, but Jaren liked to use the idea of bodyguard in another way. The stresses of his life often bore down like a weight on his mind. It was a burden that often threatened his ability to cope, so he decided to take action and appoint his own guard to protect his mind. The bodyguard of his mind and emotions helped him to increase his awareness of thoughts that might affect his mood. Jaren's bodyguard of his thoughts always watches over him and filters away any negative thoughts before they can upset him. That was the goal, anyway. He shook his dark head and softly chuckled to himself. He tried to always practice using his bodyguard, but mastering the skill proved difficult at times. He constantly strove to become better and better at utilizing his bodyguard. Practice makes perfect, right? A rustling distracted his attention away from his book, and he jerked his head in its direction to see a very petite young Fey woman crawling into his tent via the back end, where there likely weren't any guards at the moment. They locked eyes. It was like locking eyes with a surprised deer in the forest. She looked frightened, uncertain, and somehow determined all at once. Jaren put his book aside and walked over to her, making sure to stay out of arm's reach. "Hello? May I ask why you're sneaking into my tent?" Perhaps he should have felt more threatened, but honestly he couldn't imagine what she would do to him. She was so small and didn't appear to carry any weapons. If she did, in her presently prone position, she would have a devil of a time utilizing one. She was still half stuck under the tent as well. Hello, I guess?" She spoke in a meek voice. Her eyes darted around the tent for a few seconds, and perhaps in confusion. "You're Prince Jaren, right?" A quirky smile tickled at the corner of his mouth as he crossed his arms across his chest. That's what they call me. Who are you? Imari. I'm Imari, she answered awkwardly as she resumed her wriggling. Jaren stood watching, totally perplexed and amused all at once. This was by far the strangest encounter he had ever had, and he had certainly had a few peculiar ones. You still haven't told me why you're here, Amari. She paused and tucked her long hair behind one ear. She was nearly in the tent now, but her legs were still outside the tent. It's complicated. I'm one of the Fae who lives nearby. That explains nothing, Jaren replied with a hint of amusement. I need you to come with me, please. But also, I'm not asking. So you're kidnapping me. Amari tucked her hair again and timidly nodded. Wow, you're really, really terrible at kidnapping. Her expression soured at his insult. She gave him a look for a second and began reaching for the paralyzing potion she had prepared. All she had to do was splash it on his skin, and he'd be completely immobilized for an hour or so. Suddenly, she felt two big hands grip her ankles and yank her back out roughly. Her assailant moved so quickly that he had her on her feet with her arm pinned painfully behind her back before she even realized what was happening. Who are you and what are you doing sneaking into the prince's tent? A hard, gruff voice demanded in her ear. Imari? My name is Imari. I'm not going to hurt him, she cried out in answer. She was trying to kidnap me, Jaren stated casually as he strode around the outside corner of his tent. She was doing a very poor job of it, but that's what she told me. Keist thought that he should have called for help immediately, but looking at the small woman, he completely understood why the prince opted not to. There's no need to hold her like that, Keist. The poor girl is in pain. Let's just tie her up and ask her some questions, Jaren said as he watched the Fey woman's pained expression. She may be in trouble, but she certainly wasn't the physical sort of trouble. There was no need to hurt her. By the time several other guards had arrived to see what was happening, they were all very surprised to see what the commotion was about. Keist instructed one of the other guards to check her pockets before he released her. They found several potion vials with a purple liquid inside and some trail rations. Once everything was confiscated, Keist released her from the hold and grabbed her by the arm to drag her to the center of camp. He also ordered some of the other guards to search the surrounding forest to be certain she was alone. Amari cooperated with all their movements, since she knew there was no way she could overcome any of them physically. It wasn't long before she was tied to a post in the middle of the campsite. They had actually missed 2 vials of her paralysis potion in a hidden pocket in her tunic, but there was no way she could access it with her hands tied. Anyway, she didn't have enough to paralyze all the guards, so it would be wasteful to try and use them now. She quietly thought to herself that she did not plan this out very well. Why were you trying to kidnap the prince? Keist squatted down in front of her, looking very intimidating. He was a well-muscled man with carrot-orange hair, which, although it was cropped very short, still sprung out in an unruly fashion. There was a mild dusting of freckles over his face, which seemed to help soften the sharp features and furrowing brow. She wondered if he always looked so serious. I was trying to kidnap him in order to help my people. Your king is trying to push us out of our ancestral homes, so I thought I would use the prince to negotiate or something. Amari decided that since she was already in trouble, or already caught, there was no point in concealing information. In her experience, the more honest she was, the faster she usually got out of trouble. And what is this? Keist held up the vial of purple liquid. Nothing harmful, just paralysis potion I made. I was going to use it to paralyze him and take him back to my village. The guard gave her a look, hard stare. It made her feel like an insect. So, you thought you would sneak into camp all alone, paralyze the prince with your potion, somehow drag him out of the tent and away from camp unnoticed, and then somehow get him back to your village. Then you would use him to negotiate with King Ramos to stop doing whatever he's doing to your people, right? Amari nodded slowly. That did sum it all up, but she felt like he was about to be mean to her. Are you an idiot? There it was. There were definitely holes in her plan, but it wasn't fair to call her an idiot. In the past, Amari would have shrunk away from such a comment. However, this brute was unaware that recently she had decided to pick a fight with that part of herself. She successfully taught herself to subdue the more timid part of her character. Now she felt her own confidence and was not afraid to show it to the world. This newly acquired confidence caused a different reaction. She was angry. Keist was caught off guard to find the Fey woman glaring back at him with her lips pursed tightly. He expected her to get uncomfortable and maybe a little sad, not angry. The expected reaction should have yielded more information, but an angry person never wants to talk. He held her glare for a moment. She did not waver. He decided to question her more in the morning. Most likely they would end up letting her go, but he wanted to be certain there wouldn't be any other attempts on her part to kidnap the prince first. Even though they would be easy to thwart, he instructed the guards to watch her in shifts for the rest of the night, and went about making sure the prince would be secure for the rest of the night. An hour or so later, the camp was quiet. Keist was beginning to doze off for the night outside of the prince's tent when several of the other guards jumped him and tied him up. He fought hard against those who were supposed to be his comrades, and he managed to break one of their noses and perhaps crack a few ribs, but they had the element of surprise, and there were 4 of them. Keist ended up with his weapons gone and his hands shackled behind his back, as well as his feet shackled, so he could only manage a shuffle. Why did they have shackles? This was very wrong. Another group dragged Prince Jaren out of his tent, similarly shackled. To the prince's credit, they certainly looked worse for wear as a result of the struggle. They had also taken the Fey woman from her post and retied her bonds to be mobile. They had her kneel on the ground with Keist and Prince Jaren. Then, Keist saw the dozen extra soldiers in their camp. Soldiers all wearing black armbands with a drawing of a green fang on it. They were talking with the traitorous guards in a friendly fashion. The cult of the Fang, Amari whispered fearfully. Who are they? Keist asked quietly, eager for more information. She looked frightened to her core. He didn't like that at all, but he pushed away any negative thoughts to think clearly. She swallowed hard before answering. They worship the Volklar. The Volklar were beasts of legend that resembled wolves in a way, except they were supposed to be 10 feet tall, walk on 2 legs, have long needle-like talons, a mouthful of venomous fangs, be highly intelligent, and have an obscene propensity for violence. The Volklar aren't real, Keist countered quietly. Amari jerked her head to look him directly in the eyes. They are extremely rare, almost extinct, but very real indeed. We Fae know of them and still carry our protections against them. Keist absorbed her words. If what she said was true, then the situation just became a lot worse than he thought. His eyes spied a necklace of wooden runes she wore around her neck. He had thought it only decorative before. He realized now that it was not. So we're sacrifices? Jaren whispered fearfully. He was not acting out, but Keist could see the panic settling in his brown eyes. No, we're not. Stop thinking that right this second. Regardless of their intentions for us, we will not be sacrificed. Do you understand me? Keep that out of your mind. Think of how we will get out of this. Keist was sharp and left no room for argument. He would not accept that kind of thinking. Such bad thoughts cannot pollute one's mind when you are trying to solve a problem. Throaty laughter sounded behind them. Oh, there's no getting out of this for all of you. King Ramos himself gave the order. There was never any treaty renewal. The king needed to prove himself to the cult of the Fang, so he gave us his own son to prove loyalty. Sorry, Keist. We knew you would never join in the plot, so you have to go the way of the prince. Bigger apologies to you, missy. Wrong place, wrong time, I'm afraid. The guard leaned down, looking Prince Jaren directly in the eyes with a demented pleasure. How does it feel to be betrayed by your own father? Jaren was surprisingly unemotional as he stared back at the traitor. He is not my father, he replied evenly. Yeah, I thought that might be your sentiment. The guard shrugged and stood up. The rest of them were coming back over now. They began getting the three of them to their feet and situating them to walk in a chained line behind one of the horses. They were being taken somewhere to be held for at least a few hours. Once they were all ready to move, they began walking them through the woods. Jaren was the first in the line, followed by Keist and Amari in the rear. The two men found themselves constantly stumbling over roots and rocks in the dark. Being Fae, Amari could see clearly in the dark and walked normally. After a while, she began calling out any obstacle she could see coming up to aid them, which decreased their stumbling quite a lot. Do you think they will sacrifice us as soon as we arrive at wherever they're taking us? Jaren asked quietly of his companions. No, because we aren't going to be sacrificed. We just need to figure out how to escape. I told you to stop that, so stop it. Now, Keist replied sternly. We have 3 days to figure something out. They will wait for the full moon to do it, Amari offered from the back. Keist looked over his shoulder and gave her a nod. He liked her tone. It sounded like she was thinking positively. 3 days is good. We can work with that. They shambled along wordlessly in the dark for a few minutes more. Keist? Amari inquired. Yes? Please tell us again how we're going to survive this? She pleaded desperately. Amari needed to hear it again. She knew Jaren needed it too. Amari, Jaren, listen to me now and repeat this to yourselves over and over again. We are escaping from this. We will find a way. Do you understand? Any negative thoughts that try to creep in, stamp them out immediately. Do not give it the opportunity to poison your mind. You are better than that. They do not deserve your time. And that is The Bodyguard. Or Bodyguard, not the movie with Whitney Houston, which was a really good movie. But that is Bodyguard. Obviously, Keist is the literal form of the bodyguard and being one himself. But I hope you enjoyed it. So next month in December, because the podcast is now once a month, you will be hearing the next story in the series, which is called Protect Your True Self. So the next short story will be called Protect Your True Self, and you'll get to hear where they're being held, hear more about who the Cult of the Fang are, and whether or not they get out of it. Okay, you know they're gonna live. These are the characters, so they're not gonna just be sacrificed like straight away. So they're gonna get around the sacrifice part. But you have to come back in December to find out. And again, if you haven't listened to the first story where we actually introduce the character of Amari and her whole thing, and you find out what happened with the satyr a few weeks earlier, that's Picking a Fight with Yourself, episode 29 of the podcast. And yeah, that is it. I am super excited to read these with you and share them. Again, if you like them, please let me know. I am thinking of turning these short stories into like a little short story, like a little book of the short stories, or perhaps another novel entirely. Probably a little book of the short stories that will just be like a one-off. I don't need a third fantasy series. Maybe I do. We're going to find out. It's going to be fun. So please come on back. Next December it'll be around December 15th. Mid-month, the middle of the month is when I am doing the podcast. Okay. So the second Sunday in December, which I'm checking my phone now to see when that is, because I just cannot. It will be second Sunday in December is December 10th. So please come on back December 10th, or frankly, if you just want to listen on Spotify whenever you feel like it, the next episode will happen on December 10th. So catch up by then, listen whenever. And, also, don't forget to, if you want to check out my website, hollisjoemccullumauthor.com. That is, I've got a mailing list. I post updates. I post updates about my blog. In my blog about my podcast, about Ignited, my other books, JordanCon, everything. If you just want to know more about the books or have direct links to purchase them, which it's all on the website, and you can join the mailing list. I truthfully maybe send out an email once a month, sometimes not even that much. I definitely won't spam you. You will not be spammed. So once a month, is really the amount, sometimes twice a month if I have a lot going on. So it is the holiday season. It might be 2 emails in November and 2 emails in December, but then you'll be back to like 1 email every 6 weeks if you join the mailing list, which I hope you do, because I'm not sending emails that don't actually have actionable, fun things to share. So, because I don't want to spam you. So yeah, please go to the website, look for Ignited on Amazon and wherever else books are sold, but Amazon always gets it first. I'm so excited to share it with you. Spare the Swallow, of course, already available. You can go to my website to get your copy. Oh my gosh. And that's pretty much it. So, yeah. I'm going to bid you adieu.